Hello everyone, I am Sugary Sweet, and you are watching Battle 11 of my Shiny Force 3 Scenario 1 Insane Mode Efficiency playthrough. So I want to start this video with a bit of a warning. This video is going to contain some strobing lights, so basically this is just a seizure warning for those of you with epilepsy or what have you. So there's been quite a change in the scenery, with us battling in the middle of a graveyard this time. So those of you unfamiliar with the game might be wondering what's even going on right now. So first I'll lay out the objective for this map. So right now there's a bunch of enemies on the map called Kyonshi, which is basically just a Chinese word for zombies. So right away you're going to see most of the force ignoring the ones that spawned right in front of us and just walking off to the side. So I'm going to take some of my units that have less favorable starting positions and have them take a few pot shots at them. And this is pretty much just to gain a little bit of extra experience. In fact, Eldar actually learns Twister while we're doing this. Now, these Kyonshi could probably one-shot a bunch of our units, but our NPC guest Kahn is going to come in here and instantly delete them with his Albusum Orb. So basically what's going on here is that these zombies are actually cursed villagers, and Kahn wants to use his Albusum Orb so he can turn them back to normal. As I mentioned, the Force couldn't rely on the train anymore after the last chapter when the tracks got destroyed. So they decided to start walking their way back to the Republic, and on the way they stopped by the village of Konos. There was obviously something very wrong with the village because it was completely deserted, but after a short exploration section, we learned from Kahn that there's a demon-like creature called a Vandal who's terrorizing the village. So this is also why Julian actually joined the party in the first place, because he was hoping we would run into a Vandal eventually. So I guess it's lucky for him that the train tracks got destroyed and we just happened to wander into a village that has a Vandal terrorizing it. I'm not really sure what his plan was before that happened, but even though this has nothing to do with the civil war that's about to happen, Benetram kind of realizes that a demon that can control and twist people is kind of the enemy of all mankind. So we're going to stick around to help Kahn and Julian take him out. So right here you're actually about to see one of the other gimmicks of this map, which is that when you walk to certain points on the map, some of these graves are just going to burst open and have a bunch of extra enemies added onto the map. So just like reinforcements on any other map, they can move as soon as they appear, as long as they have the appropriate amount of agility. So who we use to trigger these spawns can sometimes be important, because if we use someone who's slower than the enemy to spawn them, then our entire force can kind of react to the spawn before the enemy even gets to take a turn. In this case it doesn't matter too much because Mascarin is the one who spawns it, and she's usually the fastest in our group. And we have enough units to take out one measly Vampire Bat. Just like any other new enemy, this Vampire Bat can hit really hard, and he actually has a special attack that can drain your HP. So sometimes that can make killing them even more annoying. But usually Hayward can make short work of them since they are flying units, and otherwise they don't have crazy defense or anything, so we can combine to get KOs on them. So you can also see right here that Eldar and Julian are kind of wandering off on their own here. While Julian is basically just trying to bait that one guy in, Eldar is actually going to make one of her first contributions via her flying utility. So anyway, as I mentioned earlier, we're here to first save the villagers by letting Kahn break the curse with his Albusum Orb. So speedrunners kind of hate this map, pretty much because Kahn is a massive asshole who just randomly likes to decide he doesn't want to use his Albusum Orb. Sometimes he walks behind Symbios, he actually just follows Symbios around. Sometimes he'll walk behind him and decide not to use it. Sometimes he'll walk straight up into the enemy and then not use it. Sometimes he'll see that there's 3 enemies that you grouped up for him and he decides to use it only on 2 of them. He's just a huge frustration on this map. The one nice thing I can say about him is that unlike Irene, he actually heals himself if he gets damaged, so you don't have to worry about him dying most of the time. But regardless, I kind of have the same attitude about this map in that it's pretty annoying, so we're going to use the typical strat that people came up with, which is we're only going to allow Kahn to save certain villagers and just let the rest die. You already saw that I killed 2 of the Kyonshi already, so let's kind of break down what exactly we're trying to do here. So as you might expect, certain Kyonshi on this map correspond to certain villagers that will appear in Konos after you finish the next 2 maps. So it's actually pretty important that we save certain ones, because a lot of them are actually pretty important to our progression. So the 2 that you saw near the start actually aren't important, but since Kahn pretty much always gets them, we're gonna let them off easy. And then you saw near the beginning, I killed the two that were in the way of the force, but I kind of ignored the guy who was next to the lake. The two guys that got in the way are just regular villagers, and they don't really do anything other than just talk to you and give some random flavor text. So we're just going to kill them. And the two guys further down that road are also regular villagers, so you're going to see me kill them as well. But the guy near the lake at the start of the map is actually the accessory shop owner. His is the first accessory shop that we run into in this game, and the accessory shops are actually pretty rare in general, so it can be pretty useful to leave the guy alive. Only problem is that starting this chapter, which is chapter 3, we're actually starting to have some gold issues, so we're not going to be able to buy very much from the accessory shop, especially considering that accessories are actually significantly more expensive than other items at this point in the game. Anyway, that just leaves the Kyonshi that is the one Julian is trying to bait in, as well as the three that are on the opposite side of the lake. So the one Julian is trying to bait in is actually the priest of the village. Usually these guys save the game and promote your characters and all that stuff, but you don't actually get punished for letting him die because a fairy NPC just replaces him anyway, and she does the same duties. And given that we've already killed a couple innocents here, I think we're going to hell anyway, so I don't think a dead priest is going to make much of a difference. But the three on the opposite side of the lake who are near the house are actually all very important. Which I'm sure is a deliberate design choice, but that's still pretty annoying because otherwise I could have just rushed to the end and just killed them all, and that'll probably save me a couple turns if I could do that, instead of having to struggle against Kahn's really stupid AI. Now, the two who start near the entrance to the mansion are actually the weapon and item shop owners, so I think the value of saving them should be fairly obvious. But the most important Kyonshi is actually the guy who starts near the lake on the opposite side of the force. So, like I said, he is by far the most important one to save. And if you're going to save just one guy on this map, it should definitely be that one. So that Kyonshi is actually going to become a recruitable character. He's called Noon, but just like the other villagers, he's not going to appear until you finish the next map. So we're going to save talking about him in detail for later. So a couple of moments ago you just saw Eldar do her flying utility job, which is that she flew to a certain block on the opposite side of the map and basically spawned the entire map at once. Obviously this is something only Eldar can do because she can fly across the lake and nobody else can. And even though the spot that she went to looked very dangerous since there were a lot of enemies around, most of them couldn't reach her, so she was actually perfectly safe there. Occasionally, depending on how the Kyonshi decide to move around, because it's kind of random, it is possible one of them can reach her and give her a good thrashing, but she will survive that. So in addition to spawning every enemy on the map at once, the real value of her doing this early on is she actually changes the way the AI behaves, because the game thinks you're near the end of the map. So what happens is that a bunch of the enemies that were normally just going to stand around and not do anything and pick their nose are going to start actually charging you instead. So that saves us quite a bit of trouble. The first most obvious target of this is the Kyonshi that we were trying to bait in with Julian earlier. If we didn't trigger his AI to change earlier in the map like we do here, we're going to have to add like an extra turn or something to the end of the map for us to wait for it to come to us. But instead we could bait it in with Julian a little bit, and then we can just trigger this AI change so that it charges at us. The other thing, of course, is that the Vampire Bat and the Lich that just spawned, they will also charge the party, which ends up making things a lot easier to handle. And if you think about it for a second, that probably makes sense, because regularly if you have your units near the end of the map and they spawn the Lich and the Vampire Bat all at once, what's going to happen is that the two remaining Kyonshi, or I guess the three remaining Kyonshi, are going to charge your party at the same time as the Vampire Bat and the Lich, and it's just very annoying to handle all at once. And in fact here, Eldar is going to do a follow-up to her flyer utility by baiting in the Lich. Now, even though the Lich actually does have the Tornado spell, which is very, very strong against flyers like Eldar, she has enough HP to take it like a champ, so Eldar is already starting to show her utility value here. Now, of course the Lich is still not within range of the rest of the party, so we're going to need to continue baiting it in. And Eldar doesn't have enough HP left over to take another Tornado, even if I healed up with the healing herb. So I'm going to make her back off a little bit and baiting the Lich with the rest of the party. Now this does mean I have to take another Tornado, which of course is always very annoying because aside from doing a lot of damage, it also hits multiple units at once. But because of how he spaced out engaging the enemies, I don't need to worry about it too much. I'm already pretty safe where I am. Now the Lich is of course pretty dangerous, not just because of its AoE spells, but because it's insane mode it also hits very hard. But the final thing that makes it very dangerous and very annoying to kill is the fact that it's a floating unit. Now certain floating and flying units in this game are very annoying because they have a very high base dodge rate. This doesn't apply to every single flying unit since obviously we've fought some flying units already and we haven't had any troubles with dodges yet. But the Lich is one of the first enemies that has this property where they have a base 25% dodge rate as opposed to the more common universal dodge rate of around 3%. 75% hit rates are very annoying because it's kind of in that spot where simultaneously you think it's high enough to be relied on, but it's also low enough that you are very uncomfortable while doing so. And of course the more enemies you throw at a floating unit like this, the higher chance that something is going to go wrong. Now, obviously, there are ways around this. The most obvious one is just our always trusty mage, Mascarin. Magic can't really be dodged in this game. And in fact, this Lich is actually weak to fire magic, so Mascarin is going to be even more useful against it. Undead units like this in general typically are weak to fire in this game. So that's one guaranteed source of damage that we can rely on. Now in this particular recording, you do see me get Sonic Wave on Symbios as a follow-up, which safely deletes the rest of the Lich's HP. But even though that was really nice to get, it's not something I really needed, because there actually is another way around the increased evasion rate of the floating units like the Lich, and that is our archer, Hayward. If I hadn't gotten that Sonic Wave on Symbios, I could have just left the space behind him free for Hayward to get the attack bonus from Symbios and finish off the Lich. But since I got a little bit lucky, I'd instead just put Thuntaris there. Doesn't matter too much. So the thing about Hayward is that not only does he have weapon triangle advantage against floating/flying enemies like the Lich, so he has a very high base critical hit rate already. Right now he still only has Ice Arrow, but of course he still has the Loincloth, so he has about a coin flip chance of just getting Ice Arrow and instantly killing the Lich. But on top of that, even if he only got a normal attack, he still would have been able to kill the Lich's remaining HP. And in fact, the high base evasion on enemies like the Lich is slightly negated by archers attacking them. So it's one of those unique mechanics in this game that the game doesn't really tell you about, but it is something that you'll notice if you play the game long enough. And this right here is a big reason why I said back when we recruited Hayward that he is actually one of the most essential characters for the early to mid game of Scenario 1. On this map and the map that's going to come up next, there's a fair amount of very strong floating enemies, and we're certainly not at the point yet where magic is going to completely overtake the run. So Mascarin alone can only do so much against all these enemies, and Hayward is going to help out a lot in taking out floating enemies like the Lich. Anyway, since the Lich was taken out by Symbios, we have Hayward attack the Vampire Bat that just came in instead. Obviously, we really didn't need him to do that. We have our entire party here, and we could have dogpiled the Vampire Bat and killed it pretty easily. And with that Vampire Bat gone, the only things left are going to be the 3 remaining Kyonshi on the map. Obviously, we still want to go save the weapon and item shop owners. The weapon shop is going to provide a couple upgrades for us, including a weapon upgrade for Albright and spears for our cavalry. It's actually also going to have an upgrade for Symbios' dagger as well. So you do miss out on quite a few upgrades, at least for one map, if you don't save the weapon shop owner here. The item shop owner, obviously we want to be able to access medical herbs if we run out. And she's also going to have a goddess tier available as a haggle, so we do want to be collecting those. We're going to be using them here and there throughout the run, and they're just always nice to get because you're never going to be able to buy them normally in this game, so you should try to pick them up whatever chance you can. And like I already said, the last Kyonshi that's approaching us is the priest, and we're not really going to care about him. And we're going to let some of our underleveled force members get some experience hitting it. So there's not much else left to do on this map except a bunch of self-improvement. As usual, I take whatever chances I can get to have Grace and Irene cast heals on people. And speaking of Irene, Kahn is actually going to join the party officially at the end of this map. He's another monk character, so he is also an off-healer. And he also has a number of utility spells that he learns later on. Unfortunately, he learned some of them a little bit too late, which is kind of a problem with him. It is kind of hard to determine who between Irene and Kahn is more useful. I think they're both pretty useful throughout the run. Whereas Irene is going to be able to continue to chip a lot of enemies using her tornado spells. Kahn can't really do that, and he's basically completely support for the most part. The other thing is that Kahn kind of comes trained in knuckles instead of gloves, which I would say are a slightly worse weapon type overall compared to gloves. just because a lot of gloves that you'll get later on in the game have a lot of utility use, which Knuckles, for the most part, don't really have. So one final thing worth noting on this map, or rather the lead up into this map, is that during the previous exploration section, even though there were no NPCs to talk to, we did still search all the homes, and there was actually a Brave Apple in one of the homes. Now, the Brave Apple actually just raises one unit's level by 1 instead of increasing stats or something. Obviously, we can use it to get a perfect level up if we wanted to, but more importantly, we're actually approaching the point in the game where the game is actually expecting you to be promoted. In fact, there are some people who like to grind the hell out of this game until they are promoted before they reach the next map, because the next map is a pretty tough one. We're obviously not going to do that, but we're going to start feeling the pain of being unpromoted pretty soon. So we're actually going to hold on to the Brave Apple until somebody reaches level 9, and we're going to use it to level them up so they can immediately promote at a point where we're going to really need it. Which is only going to be a few maps in the future, but I was just noting that unlike a lot of the other stat boosters we've gotten up to this point, we're actually going to hold on to the Brave Apple until later. So all there's left is the one Kyonchi, and like I said, everybody else is going to do a bunch of self-improvement while Kahn actually decides to move his ass and remove the curse on the guy. So I'm going to heal when it's applicable, and then a bunch of other people are just going to take a couple pot shots at the Kyonchi just to get some extra weapon experience if they can. Now, Kahn, just like Irene, actually has pretty decent agility, so at least I don't have to wait until the very tail end of the turn and let the Kyonchi hit me once before he does anything. And just like with Irene, that's something that's going to make him useful when he finally joins us. And there's actually one final quality of him that makes him kind of useful for the next couple maps. But I'll go ahead and save that topic for the next video, because the next map is going to be a very, very difficult map, and it's also going to be easily the longest recording yet. So go ahead and look forward to that, I guess. So that's Battle 11. It's completed in 10 turns. I'll see you guys next time.